Bills Mafia, what's going on? Welcome into the Monday, October 14th edition of First and Five. I am your host, Dave Myers, owner and founder of Built in Buffalo, and I have a really good friend of mine today. I'm excited. We've been trying to get on stuff for a while. We've been long friends for a long time. Ryan Talbot, if you guys know him from the Shout podcast from NewYorkUp.com. Ryan, how are we feeling going into tonight's game against the New York Jets?
I don't know how to answer that, to be quite honest, because of the injury report and the uncertainty around like Khalil Shakir, because I think he could be the key to the outcome of this game. I do think going into it, it feels a little bit like a coin flip game, but I still think the Bills have enough talent to win this one on the road, even if Shakir, for instance, isn't able to go.
So I had Dan Fates on from the Buffalo Plus podcast on Thursday, and I posed this question to him, and I'll pose it to you. Do you feel like, seeing how the season has played out so far, the Bills started out 3-0, offense looked hot, Josh Allen was in the MVP conversations all over national media, and then a couple games I think that they would love to have back against the Ravens and Texans. Is this a must-win game, do you feel like, or is there more long-term plans, seeing how this one might play out? What's your thoughts?
I don't consider this to be a must-win game. I don't look at the Jets as this team that's going to go on this run where they, the Bills have to be neck and neck with them each week. And you look at the Dolphins, there was an update today about Tua and the fact that he won't be ready to play this upcoming week. And they think he'll play at some point this season, but they've dug themselves a little hole, and the Patriots are just a mess in their own regard. So at the end of the day, the Bills just have to win this division to get into the playoffs, and you just hope that they're hot at the right time if you're a Bills fan. So for that reason, I don't look at this as a must-win game. I still think this division is very much there for the taking. Now, if the Bills win this, obviously, they go up 2 games in the division. They're 2-0 in the division at that point with wins over the Dolphins and the Jets. So it certainly means something, but it's not the be-all, end-all if they were to lose tonight.
Yeah, we were talking before we went live about how in recent Bills history, we've always considered, even going back to 2020, we've considered every game something where we're 100% confident that the Bills are going to come out and they're going to try their best and they're going to win the game. This game tonight, and this is just me speaking, I feel a little different. Like I think the Bills can win this game. I absolutely think, with what's going on with the Jets and firing Robert Saleh and having a new play caller, and then Nathaniel Hackett was demoted, you want to say, and they got a new offensive play caller. I feel like I'm not sure what to expect, because a lot of people talk about the whole, well, let's get up for the interim guy week, and then teams have film on how he runs the team, and then it goes downhill from there. I don't completely buy into that. After the first 3 games, the Bills looked really good. And then the last 2 games, the Bills struggled offensively. I'm just not sure what to expect, number one, from Joe Brady. Josh Allen's had a couple off games. So what to me sticks out the most, and then we'll get into like the injury reports and stuff like that. What to me sticks out the most that needs to go right, or what do you want to see from this Bills team tonight to kind of feel comfortable heading into, the rest of the season?
Yeah, for tonight alone, I'd like to see Josh Allen take some of the layups, some of the shorter throws. I felt the same way you did about Joe Brady after last week's game against Houston, and it felt like the offense didn't flow together in terms of what they were calling, why they were calling it. And then you go back and you rewatch the game, and you see that he did have guys open at points of the game for 5-6 yard gains, as little layups as they were calling them last season and this season, the easy take what the defense is giving you type plays. But Allen wasn't taking those against Houston last week, and he was trying to stretch the field, and they really legitimate threat downfield. They were throwing a few deep balls to Mac Hollins. Hollins, to his credit, on a double move early in that game, won his matchup, and they almost connected there. But the Bills don't have that downfield threat. So it felt like Allen himself was trying to do too much in that game. And I don't know if it was the whole going against his former teammate and Stephon Diggs and wanting to win that game badly and trying to show that, they didn't need him. But going 9 for 30 and rewatching that game, there were some yards to be had for this offense, even on that last drive where I was very critical of the pass. Then they punted away and obviously lost on that field goal. there were one or two plays where he could have hit Kincaid. He could have hit someone 5 or 6 yards down the field. And yeah, at that point it was 2nd and 20. I get the fact that he was trying to move the chains, but you get a completion. You're at least forcing them to call a timeout. You're putting yourself in a more manageable position. I think a lot more of that game against the Texans fell on Josh than it even maybe did Joe Brady than I initially thought before rewatching that game.
Yeah, that's an interesting point because I was going to say, do you think that Josh and we all want to think that the Josh and Diggs stuff is it's washed and it's all over with, and a lot of people made a mountain out of a molehill. But do you? It's interesting that you say that. Maybe he felt a little bit of pressure to try to move the ball down the field instead of meticulously doing what he did in the first 3 weeks. But we don't know. I mean, the play calls. If you look at some of the play calls, they were calling. When they got that turnover and they started, I think it was at either the 15 or the 16-yard line of the Texans, and they were running vertical routes. Like, I don't know in what planet does that work. You got to give your quarterback, because then when he rolled out to the right like Josh normally does to get to the sideline, they were all just standing there like, all right, what are we supposed to do? And that's a topic I think for another show that we can talk about, the whole skill position players and Josh and stuff like that. All right, let's get into injuries. We know Ed Oliver's not playing. He's already been ruled out by McDermott. What's one player on this defensive line that you think can step up and step in? Is it Daquan Jones? Is it Dwayne Carter? What's your thoughts going up against this really porous Jets offensive line? What's your thoughts there?
Well, in terms of one player on the whole D line to step up, I've said it has to be Greg Rousseau in terms of applying that pressure on Aaron Rodgers. He's shown that can be very good in run defense as well. But if defensive tackle position, I feel like it's Daquan Jones who needs to step up in this game. I feel like he's had some splashes in the last game or two, but he has not played near the level that he was at in 2024 before that pec injury that he suffered over in London, where he was playing at an extremely high level. I feel like it's been a little bit of a letdown this season. This is a game where he has to step up. Dwayne Carter, to his credit, I thought had a really nice game last week. Popped quite a few times on tape in terms of getting some push into the backfield, moving the offensive lineman back. And like you said, this is a very poor Jets O-line. They do need to win up front tonight. I mean, that is my matchup to watch in terms of the Bills defense. It's up front. If they can win in the trenches with their D-line versus the Jets O-line, it's going to be hard for the Jets offense to do much of anything. And, I know Breece Hall has had 2 poor weeks back to back, but he is still a dangerous threat at running back. I love Braylon Allen, their number 2 back. He has popped a lot in terms of the physical back. But if the Bills are just, winning in the trenches early on, they can back up the Jets. They can win, they can force them into some bad situations. And then that's when the linebackers, who I think are playing at a very high level after last week with Terrell Bernard's return, Dorian Williams, the way he's playing. And I'm anticipating Taron Johnson being in this game on Monday night. So then, you get him into 2nd and long, 3rd and long. I think that's when the cornerbacks are going to have some matchups where they might be able to get some interceptions on Aaron Rodgers, where you might be able to record some sacks and maybe even, force fumbles here and there. So for me, the D-line winning tonight is huge. Starts off the edge with Greg Rousseau, but on the interior, you need to see a big game out of Daquan Jones.
Yeah, and just like you said, I think that this needs to be a Sean McDermott masterclass. Like, let the offense try to take baby steps getting back towards what they were the first 3 weeks, because you have the Jets who are 27th against the 27th pass blocking and 27th in the NFL in run blocking. This needs to be a pin your ears back and go get the quarterback, because if you let Aaron Rodgers, even though he's 40 and he looks like a statue, he's still Aaron Rodgers. And even though they've struggled this year, we've seen times where Aaron Rodgers, if given time this season, he's able to find open receivers, because if he has 3, 4, 5, 6 seconds, he's going to find somebody open. That's what he does. Where he's had issues is if you watch the Vikings game, and credit to them, they blitzed a ton. They got Rodgers off his spot, and he looked extremely uncomfortable. He was forcing throws downfield. I think that's going to be a recipe for success. All right, so we talked about Ed Oliver. You touched a little bit on Taron Johnson. I really hope that he comes back. A lot of people don't really understand how valuable he is to what the Bills do on that second level, the second and third level of the defense. Let's talk about this. Let me ask you a question. If you could pick one guy on offense, because we know James Cook and Khalil Shakir were both questionable coming into today with injuries from last week and obviously Shakir from the week before. If you could pick one, which guy would you want to be out there and which guy would you be comfortable not being able to go tonight?
Oof, that's a great question. If I had to choose one or the other, I would go with Shakir being the player that they would need out there, just because he seems to be the straw that stirs the drink, so to speak, for this passing attack. He is that weapon for Josh Allen on third down when you want to move the chains. That knows where to sit against the zone, knows how to get open against man. He is just so important to Allen and Allen's game, and you've seen how much they've struggled, or how much they struggled last week to move the ball through the passing game. I still think there's ways where if Shakir doesn't play tonight, that they can move it more 12 personnel, actually let Dawson Knox get involved in the passing game. It's been such a bizarre season for him. He's essentially just been an extra offensive lineman out there for the Bills all season. He has 3 receptions on 5 targets. Nowhere near what I thought he would have based on his contract, based on the fact I thought they would lean a little bit into 12 personnel, a little bit more, give him some opportunities. Wasn't expecting gaudy stats after 5 games, but I was expecting a lot more than 3 receptions on 5 targets at that point. So the combination of Kincaid and Knox tonight, I think you could kind of lean on them a little bit. But, the good news for Bills fans is per James Cook's agency, Cook will play tonight. So his agency came out over the weekend and said that Cook intends to play or plans to play against the Jets. That is a big boost because he can hurt you in the passing game. He obviously can hurt you on the ground. We don't know how much this toe injury is hampering him, but obviously having him even out there for, we'll say 50% of the snaps is better than having to lean on Ty Johnson and Ray Davis as your 1-2 punch for the duration of the game. I think Ty Johnson's a solid number 2 back, blocks well. He's very good in terms of catching the ball in the backfield. He's shown a bit as a runner in his time here in Buffalo from last season and this season. And, Davis really hasn't done much to date. He hasn't been able to have some of the success that we've seen some of these other rookie running backs have. There's been moments, there's been some decent runs here and there, but for the most part, it hasn't been much. So having Cook's a big boost for this if his agency is correct in what they reported that he would play. But all things considered, if the Bills can get both of them out there, even if you're limiting Shakir to third down reps or, just every other series, whatever it may be, that would still be a big boost for this offense.
Yeah, it's kind of a crazy world that we're living in with the Bills offense extremely relying on Khalil Shakir, a guy who was fighting for snaps his rookie year and then came on last year. And then I think we know what he is this year now. So let me ask you this then. How confident are you in Joe Brady looking back at the last 2 weeks and seeing how things didn't work, making adjustments coming into tonight's game? How confident are you?
Well, I mean, I don't know if I'm overly confident in that, because there's been times where, as much as I said last week, you could criticize Josh Allen a lot about his decision making. There are times where the Bills are running the ball well. They're picking up 6-7 yards on first down, and then they just go away from the run altogether, and it's pass, incomplete punt, where I feel like they could be a little bit more reliant on the ground game because it's working at times. And this offensive line, I feel like, has been pretty solid, both as in pass protection, but especially in run blocking. Get those guys going. Let them keep creating those holes for James Cook, Ty Johnson, and company. Challenge the Jets to kind of step up and beat this run game. But if you can even get it going, that's going to open up the play action. And I know that these last 2 games, we haven't seen a lot of pre-snap motion. That's another thing. I get it's tougher to do on the road, the communication aspect of it, when to send players. But that's another thing that they've gotten away from the last 2 weeks, and you've seen how poorly they've fared because of it. So there's things that I feel like Brady needs to incorporate tonight. He needs to not try to get too cute with some of the trick plays, which was disastrous against the Ravens. If Shakir doesn't play, they need to let Curtis Samuel, run some routes beyond the line of scrimmage. It feels like that's been very, very limited for a guy that had a lot of success in Brady's offense back in 2020. For a guy that stretched the field well for the Commanders last season at times, his role has been so predictable that I think that's been tough. And one other thing, if Shakir doesn't go tonight, I'd like to see Keon Coleman get some reps in the slot. Let him be that big slot, create mismatches there. There's a lot that Brady's can do that I feel like, he needs to start pulling some of these levers and not just depending on what you've been doing the last few weeks, especially with being so reliant on Mac Hollins and trying to get him is almost like a focal piece to this offense where really he shouldn't be in that type of role as much as they like him, as much of a leader as he's been on and off the field.
Yeah, to me, it's perplexing that your two highest skill position paid players on offense aren't getting any targets. That's Dawson Knox and Curtis Samuel. I think we could all agree. I was high on Curtis Samuel coming over in free agency because of the history with Joe Brady, because of what he did in 2020, playing with Teddy Bridgewater as his quarterback. We saw the highlights. We saw him lining up in the backfield, taking handoffs. We saw him lining up in the slot. He can line up outside. And then we saw what he can do with the Commanders with subpar quarterback play as well. Now you give him Josh Allen, and you should just be completely opening up the playbook for what you want to do with him. I'm not sure if, like you said, the last 2 weeks, they just went to try to do something different, to try to shake things up because maybe they thought the book was out on what they did the first 3 weeks and they were trying to change it up. I know that the Ravens and the Texans play a different style of defense than the Jaguars and the Dolphins and the Arizona Cardinals. So maybe they were trying to say, hey, look, the underneath stuff, they're not going to give it to us. Maybe we take some deep shots. I'm not sure. But, there was times, throughout the preseason when we were all trying to keep track of, what Joe Brady was trying to do. And then once you get into like the game against Jacksonville and the game against Miami, it was every different part of the personnel was going in motion where we just stopped keeping track of what they were doing because it was every single play. And then to not barely see it at all is crazy because Joe Brady did this some last year. We remember the Bills versus Cowboys last year where they used a lot of pre-snap motion and just ran the ball down their throat. And basically they were telling you, we're going to do this and we're going to tell you we're doing it because we're going to show you pre-snap what we're doing, and you're just not going to be able to stop it because of our execution. So like you said, I hope they get back to, the bread and butter of what worked. And to me, it's just get Josh in sync, in rhythm early. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. It doesn't have to be something that, they're dialing up trick plays and flea flickers. Just give him easy stuff because Josh has always said he needs to get going. He needs to have that feeling like he's involved in the game. I wouldn't even be opposed to seeing some design runs because I feel like the more Josh does that, the more successful the offense is because he just gets in his head that, he's dialed in and he's ready to go. So, all right, we talked about the Bills defense against the Jets offensive line. Is there any specific matchup player-wise between the Bills and the Jets that you might be looking at or maybe some fans might take a look at to see might be a key to this game? Is there anything that sticks out to you?
I go back to what I said about Greg Rousseau. This needs to be a Greg Rousseau game. This needs to be a game where even if he's not finishing the play with the sack, he needs to get a lot of hurries. He needs to move Rodgers off of his mark. He started off the year so well with that 3-sack performance against the Cardinals. You sat there and you said, okay, this kid's come into his own. He had a really strong summer in terms of training camp, preseason. And when he did that in week 1, it wasn't shocking. Now, anytime a player gets 3 sacks in a game, it's eye-opening, but it wasn't shocking. But he's kind of disappeared since then. He hasn't done much in the weeks that have followed. He had an opportunity to get a big sack against C.J. Stroud last week. Kind of tried to wrap him up around the upper legs and whiffed on it. And Stroud was able to, I believe, convert a first down on that very play where you get a sack there and the whole outset of the game or the whole, outcome of the game could have really changed there in that given moment. He needs to do this against Rodgers, who, Rodgers is not nearly as mobile as C.J. Stroud. He's shown a little bit of mobility this year, rolling out and things like that. He's not a guy that's going to be running a lot, but he can roll out and keep plays alive. He had a nice touchdown pass in London last week when the game was almost looking like it was going to get out of hand in the first half. He moved around, then he stepped up into the pocket enough to kind of bring the defense toward him, and then he threw a laser in the end zone. I can't remember if that was to Lazard or maybe it was someone different, but he still has some mobility. But you're right, when he's moved off of his mark, when he feels uncomfortable, that's when mistakes can happen. He's taken already a lot of shots this year, blindsided where he doesn't feel the pressure coming. I feel like Rousseau can win in his one-on-one battle early on, and sometimes maybe get those block or get in there without Rodgers even seeing him coming, and that can create a turnover in its own regard. But even if he sees him coming, move him off his mark, make him uncomfortable, make him throw the ball, and maybe then that's when the back end of this defense with Rasul Douglas, who he loves to jump those routes against the cornerbacks, he can step up. Christian Benford's been unbelievable this year, and a returning Taron Johnson, I think, is going to just help stabilize the back end of this defense, much like Terrell Bernard helped stabilize that linebacker position in his return last week.
Yeah, I agree. Taron Johnson coming back, and this might sound crazy, but I think that helps our safety core back there. I really do. I think he knows he's the Mike linebacker is the guy that calls the plays, but Taron Johnson, you can tell he's gotten so intelligent at just putting himself in the right spots. And he's had Poyer and Hyde for the majority of his career. Now he's got, the younger guy. So he's he's the veteran back there. But I want to see progression from our safety group. I want to see, Cole Bishop last week in the first half, it looked like he was just kind of put on an island, and that long touchdown to Nico Collins, even Rasul Douglas was like, dude, you were supposed to be here. Like, I can't cover him. Like, that was your spot. So to see more progression from those guys, because I think that Cole Bishop is going to turn into a really good safety in this league. I think that he just needs to get the reps. And like you said, having Bernard back last week and what we're watching with Dorian Williams, I think week after week, he is progressing into a really good linebacker in this league. There is some times when he does kind of get fooled on some stuff and he takes a really bad angle, but then there's some times when he takes the exact right angle on plays and he blows things up. So I'm looking for those guys, because I don't want to, steal your thunder. But if I feel like in the past, we've looked at these type of games on paper where you're going up against a Jets offensive line who's really bad in pass protection, really bad in run protection. This is where the Bills defensive line and the linebacker should be able to make a huge impact. And I'm just hoping that McDermott's got that dialed up. Bobby Babich and those guys have it ready to go. All right, so let's get into keys to victory. So we'll talk about, I guess, the offense first. What would be your keys for this Bills offense to get back on track, to go into MetLife and get a win tonight? What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, well, first, score early. That's been one thing where they did it against the Dolphins. They did it against Jacksonville. It is almost like a confidence boost for this unit where if they can score early, they can put the other team behind a little bit. That's when they start rolling. And in both of those matchups, the games got out of hand by the third quarter, and you had backups in, and you weren't very reliant on your offense to have to do much. So starting hot's a big key for this offense, but sustaining drives, stick with the run if it's working. Don't abandon that. Take what the defense is giving you. I feel like Allen did not do that last week. Those are the three big things to me. I feel like this offensive line, like I said, has held its own this season. This is going to be a tough task. Will McDonald has had a really nice season with his speed coming off the edge, where a year ago he was inactive a lot, and you were wondering if that was a really good first-round pick, but he's flashed a lot this season. So they need to be strong at the tackle position. Make sure you can keep Josh Allen protected there. But, sustaining drives, even if you keep the ball out of Rodgers' hands, that's also when he gets a little bit he holds the ball just a little bit, he tries to make too much happen, I guess, when he finds himself in a hole. And that's when you can create these turnovers as well. You saw some of the panic last week trying to come back and win that game. And he finally made the mistake where Stephon Gilmore intercepted him. And he had some others in that game that were or could have been intercepted. So Bills getting off to a fast start is my biggest key to this game.
Yeah, I agree. We cannot go into halftime with 3 or 6 points. We just can't. Now, I will say this, the way they came back in the second half against the Texans was it was nice to see that they strung together that nice drive. Yes, they got that 15-yard unsportsmanlike conduct penalty, or the roughing the passer penalty when Josh, ran. But then they scored again, and it was 20-17, and you're like, okay, here we go. But then, to me, it's like the undisciplined stuff that the Bills have done the last 2 weeks to get in their own way. I feel like that hopefully was preached throughout practice. That was something that Sean McDermott made a point to get back to the basic fundamentals of, like you said, on offense. Josh Allen, turn your head to the left. If there's a running back sitting at the sideline with nobody in front of him, throw the ball to him. He's gonna get positive yards. High percentage plays to me on offense is what we need. I don't want to see them throwing deep to Mac Hollins, like you said. And I think Steve Smith said it earlier this week. Why not try Keon Coleman in the slot? We know that Khalil Shakir can probably run most of the route tree. Switch things up. You have Curtis Samuel. Get these guys involved early so that they feel like they're part of the game, and then keep the unpredictability going, and then use the run game, because the run game's been working, and then it seems like you said, they just get away from it. Now, granted, against the Ravens, they were down big, so they had to get away from it. You don't have a choice there. But last week, I felt like they could have just ran the ball a lot, and then it felt like there was no consistency on what type of running scheme they were running. You'd see them run left, 7 yards. You'd see them run right into a wall. You see them run left, 5 yards. You see them run right into a wall. So to me, I hope they watch the film, and I hope they watch the film, and I hope that they are taking advantage of some of the mistakes that they made. Like Josh has always said, get the mistakes out of the way earlier in the year so you can learn from them and move on. All right. So I don't always do predictions because it's so hard to figure out, on a week-to-week basis. But if you had to predict a score, and then I'll do this, I'll make it interesting. Predict your score, and if your prediction doesn't come true, what do you think the fallout will be on social media or in the Bills world, going forward?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, let me say that I did make a prediction early this week when it was on Friday. So we thought that maybe James Cook wasn't playing. We thought Shakir, these guys hadn't practiced at that point. I had the Bills losing in a close game in that original prediction. But now that I know James Cook is going to play per his agency, I have a good feeling about Taron Johnson, and Shakir really does feel like a 50-50. I'll pick the Bills to win this game. I think it can be close. I'll say 24-21. And, down to the wire type matchup. The Jets offense, even though I'm giving them 21 points in this game, they have not been very good this season. We've seen how much defenses can rattle Aaron Rodgers in this offense. We saw a Denver Broncos team shut him down, where Bo Nix threw for 60 yards in that game, and they won 10-9. They made Sam Darnold last week look like Sam Darnold of old for 3 quarters, but they were still able to hold on in Minnesota for the win because they just couldn't do enough offensively. Josh Allen has had some issues with this defense in the past. I know the last game, it was a blowout win for Buffalo, but the Jets have had his number at times with turnovers, with interceptions. It wouldn't shock me if he threw his first interception tonight, which could set up a score. But I think the Bills have enough talent to win this. If they don't win, as odd as this sounds, it might not be the worst thing for this team, because it might force Brandon Beane to go out and make a move where if they win this and move to 4-2 and have a 2-game lead in this division, Beane might sit there and say, it's the Titans the week after that. That's a winnable game. Then they could be sitting at 5-2. Not that he sits there and is going to rest on his hands, but a loss might put the Bills into more of a panic mode to say, hey, Cleveland, what's it going to take to get Amari Cooper over to this team? It looks like it's just not working there. He's had some bad drops in Cleveland, but that offense has been a mess. What can we get for this guy who, one, they can fit under the salary without making any kind of moves? They could probably get him for a day 3 pick, and that would help stabilize the wide receiver position as well as improve your overall depth. The whole Devontae Adams stuff, I don't know how much of it I believe, just because of the salary and the Raiders stating pretty publicly they don't want to have to eat any of that salary. If they're desperate enough, maybe they would, but I at least think it makes the Bills call about guys like Cooper, Deontay Johnson in Carolina. And there's some others as well that could be had, maybe a Darius Slayton with the Giants, depending on what they think their season's looking like. I just think there's enough guys out there where the Bills could bring someone in. Maybe it wouldn't be a top flight receiver like Devontae Adams, but someone that could really help improve this roster where if a Khalil Shakir is out, they still have enough in the passing game to help them. It was pretty apparent how important Shakir was to this offense last week in that loss to Houston and how much they had trouble sustaining drives. So I think that a loss, that could be the silver lining. It would force Brandon Beane to make a move in the upcoming week.
Yeah, too. I agree. Great points all across there. And I agree too. And a lot of what people aren't talking about is the fact that there's always that week after the London games, that no pun intended, the jet lag that you get. They're coming back to America, and they obviously just dismissed their head coach. And I feel like it's just the Jets. I feel like it's just a dysfunctional team. The only concern I have is that, like you said, Josh Allen, it seems like MetLife Stadium, when he's playing the Jets, it's a house of horrors. I'm not sure what it is about that stadium. Like you said, they have a really good defense, and Robert Saleh was always a really great defensive mind. So with him not being there and their defensive coordinator actually being the head coach and managing the entire game now, maybe that is in the Bills' favor. But like you said, if the Bills come away with a loss, I'm predicting the Bills to win. I had 21-17, very close game, similar to what you had, 24-21. If the Bills come away with a loss, I still don't know if Brandon Beane wants to, skew from his plan of this is what we're going to assess and this is the direction that we're going in at the wide receiver and skill position. I don't know if he's going to do that. Like you said, I would like to see a move. I do think Amari Cooper is going to make less than Keon Coleman this year for the rest of the season. So that's just, it makes too much sense. And he has absolutely horrible quarterback play with Deshaun Watson in Cleveland. So it's going to be interesting. If the Bills do win, like you said, they're essentially 3 games ahead of the Dolphins and the Jets because they have the head-to-head wins against both those teams. If the Bills lose, they're the 9 seed in the AFC. So it's a huge disparity. I know it's early; it's week 6, and me and Ryan were talking before we came on that it's absolutely a marathon and not a sprint. The Bills could get hot after the trade deadline and just string together a ton of wins and get hot when they're supposed to, like they did last year. So it's going to be very interesting to see. Hopefully it's a Bills W. Before we get out of here, Ryan, where can everybody find your content and what do you have going on, for the next week or so?
Yeah, you can find my work at NewYorkUpstate.com or Syracuse.com. You can find the Shout podcast and all your favorite podcast platforms. But we also stream live on YouTube, X, and Facebook, and we'll be live tonight some point after the game, win or lose. This upcoming weekend, we will be at Wingnuts on Saturday night before the Titans game. Hope to see a lot of Bills fans out and about for that one. And always staying busy with Matt Perino and the Shout podcast.
Yeah, and if you guys don't subscribe to the Shout podcast, you should. It's one of the best in the Bills community. Ryan and Matt do a great job. They've been super consistent throughout the years. So, and if you're not following Ryan, and I will do this randomly throughout, the year on X, is follow Ryan because he gives you the information you need, whether it's free agency, the draft, Bills news updates. Just follow Ryan, writes great articles, all that good stuff. So, Ryan, it was great having you on, man. We're going to have to do this again.
Yeah, 100%. Like you said, we've had so many issues like trying to figure out best days and times, but I'm sure we can definitely do something here again soon and make it work. I always look forward to coming on these shows with you, Dave.
All right, we are just about a little less than 5 hours away from kickoff. So go Bills versus the New York Jets tonight. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a good one.